Hello and welcome to Sparky Hobbies. My name is Ben, and this is going to be the deck construction of the Muraganda Petroglyphs deck that was featured in the gameplay tutorials. I picked the deck because it's a really easy deck. It features simply just creatures that are vanilla creatures, have no abilities, and so it was a good way to start off the gameplay tutorial because for new players, they don't have to worry about any of the rules text that tends to complicate Magic, and you can simply just go over, the cost of play spells, play a land per turn, tap it, play a spell, that sort of thing. And it doesn't really have a lot of complexity to it, and it's still an okay deck. It's not a good deck, but it's an okay deck, and it's a really good deck for newer players who are just entering the game and you don't want to make things really complicated. The deck features 9 forests, 10 plains, and some secluded steps that I'd like to go into, what makes this deck sort of tick. It has a pretty aggressive mana curve. These are my first and second turn plays. I do have quite a few cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards that cost 5. So those are going to be like game finishers, and really, of course, the goal of the deck, because all of these creatures have no abilities, the real goal of the deck is to play the title card of the deck, Muraganda Petroglyphs, where all creatures with no abilities get +2/+2, and that'll just make your piddly 2/3 into a large 4/5, and your 4/3 into a 5/6, and of course you can get multiple copies of Muraganda Petroglyphs on the field, and then all of your creatures would get +4/+4, and that's a really big swinging element. It's a creature-based deck, so if we sort of look at how many creatures we have here, I have 24 creatures, 23 lands, and then the rest would be spells, which I think comes out to, let's see here, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I have 13 spells in the deck. Now, there's a couple things that could probably make this deck better. I'm not going to really change up anything in this deck. It plays more aggressive. The Savannah Lions and the Samaru Handacondas that basically are both 2/2 or 2/1 attackers for 1 mana. So and the Valiant Guard is just a 0/3 defender, really. It's a 0/3 that can attack, so it doesn't have defender. I can attack with it, but it really needs the Muraganda Petroglyph if it's going to do anything, right? So if I wanted to make this deck a little bit better, I'd switch out some of these defensive cards for more aggressive cards, because it's already an really pretty offensive deck. I'd probably shift 1 or 2 more of these cards into the 4 slot to give out a little bit more fleshy of a mana curve. But just simply, I wanted to use up my vanilla creatures. It's a good deck for new players to play. It's a good deck for me to teach new players the game. It's not overly complex, and the complexities pretty much are only really featured in trying to get Muraganda Petroglyphs and play it on the deck. So we'll look at some spells that basically are geared to do that. Secluded Step is like cycling. I can discard this card from my hand by paying 1 and draw a card. The idea is that I only need so much mana to play my spells. Once I get up to 5 mana, I would really rather have a Muraganda Petroglyphs than just another really small creature. So and that might be true even if I have a lot of little creatures and I have something that costs 4, I might choose to cycle that card even if, instead of playing something that costs 5, just to try to get this Muraganda Petroglyphs. And if we look at some of the other spells here, I have basically a Clash. Now, Clash was featured that you reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a higher converted mana cost, you can put that on the top or the bottom, or basically you basically Clash and you put that on the top or the bottom of the deck. And so that allows me to basically repeatedly look at the top card of my deck whenever it attacks and sort of filter through trying to get Muraganda Petroglyphs. Obviously, if I do win the Clash, this creature gains double strike, but really I'm using this card more as a repeated card filtering. The Explorer scope is to try to get as much land out of the deck. Whenever a creature attacks, it'll get me a land if it's the top card of my library. And so I'm just trying to get as much cards out of the way in between my Muraganda Petroglyphs. Chrome is actually a great combat trick, and it's a draw card, so that's card draw. Scry is a great card filtering deck. The Stand Firm can obviously be used as obviously a combat trick, trying to do some creature removal. Scry 2. And yet another combat trick, target attacking or blocking creature, Scry 3, and then I reveal, and it does that much damage to the creature. So if I can go get a Muraganda Petroglyphs, this card will do 4 damage to target attacking creature. So the point of these cards is to add some combat tricks, some combat removal, and to basically continually thin the deck, trying to get the key card Muraganda Petroglyphs out of the deck. Some other spells that I have is Crusade, which is probably not that great of an add because I do have it would go best in an all-white deck with all-white creatures rather than sort of this mixed job. So Crusade, not the best play. I'm not going to go ahead and remove it. I'll just go ahead and keep it. I do have a couple of artifact and enchant removals. This can possibly remove up to 2 artifacts and/or enchantments. These 2 spells are basically, one is a reoccurring token spell, Retrace. Whenever I could discard a land card and basically replay this card from my graveyard, repeatedly getting 2 white tokens, which is really just awesome with Muraganda Petroglyphs. And of course, Bestial Menace is really a great card use, just because you get 3 creatures for 1 spell, and so it doesn't take up a lot of space just to put this 1 card in the deck. And again, with Muraganda Petroglyphs, you're going to get if you have a Muraganda Petroglyphs on the field, just 1, you're going to get a 5/5, a 4/4, and a 3/3. So this card is a game winner with Muraganda Petroglyphs, and so that's really what the deck is trying to do. And it's a really very simple deck. It's very aggressive, and it's not really that complex. It's a very, very simple deck, to be quite honest, and it's not necessarily a very good deck. I'd probably have more spot removal and some sort of little bit more nasty combat tricks if I really wanted to make this deck the deck to be a little more powerful. But really, for a new player coming into the game, it works really well, just the simplicity of it. And there is an extra sort of, I guess, strategy I'd like to talk to you about, because I tend to play against a variety of diverse players, and a lot of new players right now. There's sort of a class of player right now that are basically just net decking decks from the internet, and they don't actually because they have a good deck, they can win games, and that makes them feel good, and that's very, very that's nice and everything, that they feel nice about it. But unfortunately, when you net deck, if that's all you do is net deck, you can learn how to play that deck very well. But unfortunately, many new players who sort of do this behavior don't actually know how to play the deck, and unfortunately they don't really know how to play Magic very well. And Muraganda Petroglyphs, I found, is a great deck to sort of illustrate this point, because it has so many creatures that basically every single creature can be a threat. And let's just go ahead and take Isamu Anaconda, for example, right here. It's a 1-cost creature that is a 2/2. It's a little teeny creature that doesn't seem like much of a threat. But if I get it on turn 1 and I attack you with it and attack you with it and attack you with it, and all the while you're holding in your hand a lightning bolt that you're saving because you're playing a Pyromancer's Ascension deck, and you're playing this tournament deck that really likes to have a lot of these spells to get the Pyromancer's Ascension deck to go off, you could be making a mistake just by not taking out a threat, because what this deck does is it lays creature, 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 creature. So obviously it's very weak against global removal, but what I see a lot in these tournament players is that they I'll play an Order of Sacred Bell. It's a 4/3. This puts you on a 5-turn clock. Okay, if you do not destroy this creature, if you have no way to block this creature, in 5 turns this creature will kill you. And if I have 3 other creatures out there, if you don't take care of these threats, you will lose the game. And what I see over and over with these tournament players is that they've net decked the deck and they see these vanilla creatures off. They're not really the sort of marquee cards that like make people oogle their eyes over them. They're not Baneslayer Angels. You know, they're not Grim Lavamancers. They're just vanilla creatures, and people totally underestimate the idea that you have to take care of the threats on the board. If it doesn't matter whether or not Order of Sacred Bell is the best creature in Type 2 or just like Legacy or anything. It doesn't matter that this card is an underperforming card from like perhaps your perspective. Like you'd be like, well, I would never play that card. There are much better cards for 4 mana. But if I get that card out, you cannot sit there and continue to think that, because you have to take care of the threats on the board. If you do not take care of your threats, or if you do not take care of your opponent's threats, you will lose the game. It's all about taking care of your opponent's threats and putting threats down on the table for you. This deck, all it does is put basically down threats. They're not very intimidating threats. There's lots of ways to get around them. They're not the most powerful cards printed in Magic, and because they're not very powerful cards printed in Magic, people continually underestimate it. And I cannot tell you the number of games where I played against players who sort of were a little bit cocky, a little bit arrogant, and they basically did not want to use a removal spell on my 3/3 guy for 3. Because they kept on waiting for the better card to be played. And of course they didn't realize that I was just playing just vanilla creatures and that's all I was playing. So I've done this several times where I played against some of these players and I will have my Muraganda Petroglyphs on my deck, but I want to illustrate to this player that I can beat them without it. That I can beat them with straight vanilla creatures, just straight up, just using what is known as something called Sly, and just be aggressive. Just continually attack them over the head with like just boring vanilla creatures, and if they don't answer it, they will die. And I've won 5 or 6 games just basically doing this, where I'm playing against completely superior decks. I mean, I haven't played against Cawblade. I've played against goblins with this deck. I've played against some things like Blightning and I can't tell you like which decks I played against. I have played against Pyromancer's Ascension. I played against heavy control decks, and usually the decks that really turn over in their grave to like this sort of deck and this sort of strategy is control decks, because they're always just waiting for the better card to be played rather than taking care of the threats on the board. They have the burn spell, they can take out my 4/3 creature. They have the counter spell to counter my Spined Worm, and they just refuse to do it because they're waiting for my Muraganda Petroglyphs. You know, they're waiting for the awesome card that's going to really make the deck come together. But this is the fact. I do not have to play Muraganda Petroglyphs to win. If you do not answer the threats on the board, I will kill you. And I'd really like to emphasize for people who are playing better decks than this one is that you cannot afford to sort of fool yourself into thinking that you have time, or that you have just because you have a better deck the game is automatically going to be yours to win, because you just really have to you have to play with what's on the table. You can't like play this pseudo meta game in your head. Okay, like metagame is really powerful to think about and analyze when you're building your deck, when you're thinking about the sideboard, and when you're basically constructing your deck and thinking about the format in which you're going to play in. But when you sit down to play a game, you got to think about basically the cards he may have in his hand. That's metagame. But the cards he has played on the board, and that is not metagame. That is just what you're just dealing with the threats. You're trying to play your own threats on the table, and you're just trying to win. And like this would be my advice to basically people who have not played a number of Magic games, or maybe they've sort of forgotten the fact that you cannot metagame yourself into winning. You have to really play the game. You have to play against the opponent that you're sitting across. There is no time for sort of this imaginary, I don't know, kind of like ego gaming. Anyway, I'm at 15 minutes. I'm going to let you go. That was my only extra tip with the Muraganda Petroglyphs deck as an illustration. If you have any questions, let me know.